I'm Steve Wiggins, and this is the Groundworks Ministries podcast. Today we're reading from the book of Exodus, chapter 40, and let's focus on verses 16 through 19. Moses did everything just as the Lord commanded him. The tabernacle was set up in the first month of the second year on the first day of the month. Moses set up the tabernacle, he laid its bases, positioned its planks, inserted its crossbars, and set up its posts. And then he spread the tent over the tabernacle, and putting the covering of the tent on top of it, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. You know, in most Christian circles, tent making is synonymous with not charging a fee for preaching the gospel. And the reason for this saying is because in Acts chapter 18, the Apostle Paul chose to support himself by making tents. He didn't want anyone to accuse him of preaching for profit. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 7, "So I refrained and will refrain from burdening you in any way." Paul continues in verse 12, "And what I do, I will continue to do in order to undermine the claim of those who would like to claim that in their boasted mission, they work on the same terms as we do." Well, we also know that Paul was a highly trained and qualified Bible teacher in addition to being a skilled tent maker. Acts chapter 22, verse 3. He says, "I am a Jew, born in Tarsus of Cilicia, but brought up in this city, educated under Gamaliel, strictly according to the law of our fathers, being zealous for God, just as you all are today." In Acts 18, verse 2, Paul stated his credentials as a Bible scholar. He said, "I am a Pharisee, the son of Pharisees." So of all occupations to support his ministry, why would Paul choose tent making? And for that matter, why would God call a tent maker to expand his church, preaching salvation to the Gentiles alongside his ministry to the Jewish community? I don't believe that Paul's occupation was an arbitrary coincidence. It seems similar to the way in which God chooses shepherds, guys like Joseph and Moses and David to shepherd the people of Israel. Could it be that God also chose a tent maker to canvass the known civilized world of the early church era with the gospel's influence, establishing churches as one drives tent pegs deep into the ground so that they would act as foundational supports for the greater church at large, hoisted in later generations? You know, a map of Paul's missionary journeys shows how Paul was planting congregations which radiated in a circle from Jerusalem all the way up Eastern Europe and then back down to Jerusalem. So whether it was by design or by default, Paul laid out churches in similar ways that Moses laid out the tent panels of the tabernacle and then tied them all together to form a single unit. Now today, millions of congregations have been built by the efforts of missionary tent makers throughout the generations. These churches are furthering Paul's foundational teaching of the gospel as led by the Holy Spirit, and they're fit together as a single unit, forming a greater church at large, stretching out the tabernacle of the Messiah to the most remote parts of the earth, just as the Lord commanded. I'm Steve Wiggins, and this is the Groundworks Ministries podcast. Check us out at groundworksministries.com.